Be together, we're going to continue our series on the Good Shepherd here today in the New Testament in Mark chapter 6. So if you have a Bible or you're near someone who does, you can flip over to that section of Scripture. We have been in this study starting off in Psalm 23, which is the Good Shepherd text, ultimately the most famous and referenced Good Shepherd text there. And we've looked at the prophets of Zechariah and a couple of others in Jeremiah that are all referencing not only the Good Shepherd in Jesus or this Messiah, but then also highlighting it to a bigger degree that Israel is this flock that's meant to return to the land, which is Jerusalem. And then last week, for the first time, we shifted to the New Testament in Luke 15, where we looked at the famous parable in Luke 15, where the lost sheep and the lost coin and the two lost sons. And what we're seeing here in the New Testament writers is that the New Testament writers are reinforcing this idea of who Jesus is, that Jesus is indeed this good shepherd that David prophesied about in Psalm 23. So in Mark 6, we have a series of stories that the gospel writer Mark, who is the oldest gospel writer, not in age, but as far as the oldest gospel, who was the one who was recording all these events with the help of Peter. So Peter is writing this gospel, and Mark is writing these things down literally for us. And Mark was written, if you didn't know, Mark was written to the church in Rome, to Christians that were under the thumb of Nero at this time and receiving tons of persecution. So this is a frightened church that Mark is writing this gospel to. So you will see in the canonical, or sense the canon, the scriptures coming together, you will see a thread that highlights who Jesus is in an effort to show them and remind them who he is, to teach us who he is, and also to quell a little bit of the fear and the fright and the worry and the angst of life in early Christendom, which for us, we're not necessarily a persecuted people as much as they were in the first century. Some of that is our own fault. Some of that is just the reality of life. But what I want to introduce to you this morning is to conjure up your worry, conjure up your fears, conjure up your anxieties, and bring them to a place where the Good Shepherd can answer them this morning. So it may not be a Roman breathing down your neck, threatening to kill you or to crucify you with the many who have gone before you because of your faith. But maybe there's a crisis of faith in your own heart. There's a crisis of faith of doubt or wonder, or wondering if God truly will come through. Maybe there is an anxiety over a relationship or a bill. Or again, don't guilt yourself out for a far lesser degree of difficulty than your brothers and sisters of the past who are literally going to face the sword if they're caught, in a sense, their faith. But we've got to bring this to the 21st century and to consider how God can be our good shepherd and what that really looks like. And Mark chapter 6, we're not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to talk about all of it because it was meant to be talked about in full. Mark chapter 6 here records a rich past, a new present, and also a new Eucharistic future. So it covers the gambit of what God's been up to, what he's up to right now as he inserts himself through Jesus, and then also brings to life what we all will celebrate in the new heaven and the new Jerusalem. So we understand this in our modern culture. It's kind of like a spectacle, a concert where there's multiple cameras. There's B-rolls everywhere. You've got the main camera, kind of like we do today. You got a main camera here, and then you got B-roll over there. We don't have this editing team. We could get one, but essentially you record a whole bunch of events, and then you splice it all together so it comes into a nice full picture view of everybody's vantage point. So what it looks like for Dave in the back running security, what it looks like for the imaginary person up here, what it looks like for you, you kind of put all this stuff together. That's exactly what Mark is doing. In a more traditional sense, it's like a mosaic where each individual stone has its own beauty and its own detail, but then you zoom out, it's part of a bigger picture. And that would have been more like what Mark is actually doing here. So the stories, just glance over it with me. This is the boring part, I promise. The prophet without honor is kind of a subtext. It's kind of the past that Jesus has come to preach in Nazareth and he's not accepted, and he's amazed at the lack of faith. He then leaves there And this is where we pick up in verse 6, the rest of the chapter. Jesus sends out the 12. The first time, the one voice of Jesus is now multiplied to 6 other groupings. So now there's going to be 7 voices, in a sense, expanded. So now the disciples are learning to go and to trust Jesus. They're asked by Jesus, are actually commanded, don't bring bread, don't bring bag, don't bring money, just bring no extra money, just bring your sandals and a staff. It's symbolic, but it's imagery that you're now also going to become a dependent shepherd, just like I am. Go out there with your staff to beat away the dogs, the wild dogs that are out there, and the wolves or whatever it may be. But you're going to go and you're going to be completely dependent upon people and what they decide to give you. Hospitality, if they give it to you, stay there. Don't look for anything better. Just take what you get. If they don't accept your message, then wipe your sandals, wipe the dust off your sandals. That means 2 things. I'm done with you, but it also means I'm not taking anything from you. I've come here to give. I'm not taking even the dust from your village. So a complete humility, complete dependence. We often look at it like the disciples are kind of doing a little Z-snap to the people that don't accept them, like, fine, it's over. Me and you, we ain't got nothing. That's partially it, but Jesus is actually teaching them to deal with failure. This is a free point. If it doesn't work, move on. You don't need to carry that around with you. It's really not up to you. All evangelism is a poor person telling another poor person where the free food is. That's it. That's what evangelism is. That's what it even means to be a Christian. I'm poor. I don't got anything. You're poor. You don't got anything, but I know where free food is. Let's go. Oh, you don't want it? Okay, someone else does. I'm going to go find them. That's it. That's it. So that's what Jesus is teaching them. You're poor. Go be dependent. Tell them where the free food is. And if they don't want it, then move on. It's not about you. Go tell somebody else where the free food is. That's it. Just like Jesus did. The next one, which seems to be a break, this is John the Baptist beheaded. This, if you read the entire chapter, it almost seems like, what in the world is this doing in here? But this is a major, major point that Jesus is going to insert himself to help us understand that he indeed is not only a good shepherd, but he's totally a different shepherd than the current shepherd that's going on, who is ruling, which is King Herod. You may know the story. I'm going to wrap it up here really quickly. King Herod was a big fan of John the Baptist. John the Baptist most likely was the only person that told King Herod the truth. There's a story back in 2001 where Saddam Hussein in Iraq and Baghdad, he asked the question of his military commanders, what's the weather like outside? And all of them responded to Saddam Hussein, whatever you want it to be, Mr. President. In a sense that no one's telling that guy the truth. John the Baptist did tell Herod the truth, and he respected him for it. The person who didn't like him for it was John the Baptist's little fling in Herodias. She had a grudge, she was bitter, and when John the Baptist put this symposia together, which is basically like a dinner, he put a symposia together with all the wealthy people, all the military commanders, all the who's who of the day to basically just get drunk, just to get inebriated. And Herodias takes advantage of this cultural situation where John the Baptist asks Herodias' daughter, you know what, ask me anything and I'll give you up to half of my kingdom. Ironically, Herod was not in charge of any of the kingdom. That was the Romans' land to give. So this dude's drunk beyond his mind for 2 obvious reasons. 1, to ask that he could give up land that he didn't really own, and then 2, to actually say something like that. You can have half of it if you ask me anything. And sure enough, the wife, who seems to be pretty sober-minded in one sense, asks her daughter to go ask for John the Baptist's head on a platter. And Herod now, in the midst of this company, is at a point where, you know what, if I deny this request, this makes me look weak. This makes me look bad. Am I only going to fulfill my word if it actually helps me? Or am I going to show this band of people that you can count on me, that I'm going to follow through? And he does it. And Herodias knew that he was going to be under major cultural pressure to follow through. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was willing to traumatize her daughter for the rest of her life, destroy whatever relationship she had with Herod to make sure John the Baptist was killed. If you didn't know, John the Baptist, you can go back to Mark chapter 1, John the Baptist and Jesus are cousins. John the Baptist leapt in in Elizabeth's womb when Mary approached with Jesus in her womb. They're boys. They're cousins. So now Jesus hears that John the Baptist has been killed by the shepherd of Israel, Herod. I want you to know in context that this is going to send ripples through the entire town. That this Herod killed John the Baptist. You can fast forward down the Gospels to know that John the Baptist was a respected and appreciated prophet in Israel. So much so, later in the Gospel, where Jesus is in a little bit of he's in between a rock and a hard place, he asked the Pharisees who were trying to trap him, what do you think about John the Baptist's baptism? Was it from man or from heaven? They get their little posse together and they think, and the best answer they can come back with is, we don't know. The context is, they said we don't know because if they said it's from heaven, then people are going to wonder, well, why didn't you do it? If they say it's from man, then what you're telling the crowd is that you don't believe John the Baptist is a prophet. So now they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. What I'm trying to share with you at this point is John the Baptist was a prophet. He was respected. He was appreciated. He was looked to. And the messianic fever of John the Baptist prophesying that there will be a Messiah coming is going to rouse the crowd up for a number of reasons, because you got tons of different types of people who are anticipating the Messiah. Some are like, yes, the Messiah will be here to overrun the Romans. Those are going to be the newly formed zealot group. And then you've got other people who are going to be like, you know what? We want to see the world turned upside down. We want to see the healed or the sick healed. We want to see the broken mended. We want to see the poor actually be taken care of. So when John the Baptist's head is cut off, the crowd will come to Jesus in verse 30. And they're going to gather around Jesus, as good friends often do in the midst of tragedy, to just be there. But they're also curious. How is Jesus going to respond to John the Baptist's head being beheaded? How is Jesus going to respond? And everybody wants to know that too. So pick it up with me in verse 30. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. They had just been sent out. They were then, again, those 6 additional voices come back and they're reporting. It says then in verse 31, then because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. Not only are the disciples coming back to Jesus to report, but now all these people are coming to Jesus, not because of previous things he had done per se, but they all respect John the Baptist. People are coming to be with Jesus to see how he's going to respond. As I mentioned, they're anticipating that if Jesus is this great prophet, he's the Messiah, that this moment could be a moment of revolution. That these crowds weren't coming just for a free snack. They weren't just coming for more teaching. They were coming to see if this was the moment. Jesus is going to say, you know what? Now's the time for revenge. Now's the time to take it to him. Now's the time for a revolution. This is the moment that you all have been waiting for. Verse 32, so they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. What you'll see here in this mosaic of Mark chapter 6 is you've got a stark contrast of 2 shepherds. You have Herod, who's a shepherd who brings all the best together to get drunk. This party that was meant to bring joy and excitement ends in murder. And now Jesus, as ultimately the good shepherd, sees people gathered from all these towns who most likely are thinking about revolution, most likely thinking about joining the ragtag band of these disciples and apostles to respond in revenge to the murder of their prophet, John the Baptist. And this shepherd sees people differently. In verse 34, it's a familiar phrase that we've been saying all throughout this series, that when he sees a large crowd, he has compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Not people to be roused together to fight in retaliation, but a people who need to be shepherded. People who, even in their potential thirst for revolution, were running in a way that highlights in their heart that they are indeed running freely and astray from the direction they were always meant to live by. Jesus saw them in whatever mindset they had, revolution, just simply lost. He saw it and said, these people need a shepherd. And verse 34 to 34 at the end is pretty disappointing because it says there he began teaching them many things, and we don't have any of them recorded, like nothing. But I do want you to hark back to Psalm 23 where David is saying there at that point, if you can recall, that he leads me in paths of righteousness. Jesus here, seeing them as sheep without a shepherd and then teaching them many things, this is a remez, which means you take a New Testament reference back to an Old Testament truth, that this is Jesus fulfilling this good shepherd of who he was by teaching them many things, actually guiding them in paths of righteousness here. In verse 35, by this time it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. This is a remote place, they said, and it's already very late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. But he answered, you give them something to eat. They said to him, that would take more than a half of a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? How many loaves do you have? He asked. Go and see. When they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. He gave to them to his disciples to distribute to all the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of men who had eaten was 5,000. There are so many references to Jesus being the good shepherd here. It's crazy. Maybe you picked up on them. But what you have here is sheep without a shepherd, and then he gathers them and sits them in 50s and hundreds, and he commands them to sit where? On the green grass. If you've been to Israel, you know there's only like 2 months where there's actually any green grass. And it's not hard, it's very hard to find. So here they are on this mountainside across the Sea of Galilee, and he finds green grass and he says, sit down on the green grass. This is intentional. This might be Bible dork stuff that I'm getting into, but this is intentional by Mark. He's highlighting that we have this good shepherd that's been prophesied by all these prophets and ultimately David, but now Jesus is inserting himself here. He is the good shepherd. Who is this Jesus? He is the good shepherd. He sees the sheep without a shepherd. He steps up, teaches them in paths of righteousness, and then they don't have food. Let me find the food. Not only let me find it, let me actually create this food for you. 5 loaves, 2 fish, that's not enough. The disciples get super sarcastic. What do you want us to do? There's going to be enough to feed all these people? This is sarcasm. We all would have done it. We've all would have, he's this guy. And he does it and says, okay, just take what you got, bring it to me. And he multiplies it to what point? 12 basketfuls full of bread and fish. I'm surprised there's not 13 basketfuls. They didn't think about Jesus wanted a basket. No, they didn't want. Anyway, this is Bible humor. It's only me. Anyway, 12 basketfuls, 12 tribes of Israel. This is all just boom, 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 boom. Big picture stuff that a church who's being persecuted in Rome would be reminded, oh my goodness, we have the good shepherd. He has come, he is here, he's led us to green grass, he's teaches us in righteousness, he's preparing food for us. All these things echo Psalm 23. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. Where are the enemies in this story? Without a doubt, John the Baptist being killed, Herod and this big crowds from all over coming to see Jesus. Without a doubt, in any of the commentaries, minds, or even Josephus, the Jewish writer, there were without a doubt spies of Herod here. They were there, these enemies saying, okay, how is Jesus going to respond? Is he going to rally this big crowd? Dictators like Herod, they're afraid of anything they can't control. So you see thousands of people, 5,000 men, that's not women and children, Some people even said that's the head of households here. So we're talking potentially 8,000, 9,000 people. You get 8,000, 9,000 people together just across the lake from a dictator's palace. He's sending people out there to check, because that could very well be the army that's going to be coming across the water to take him down in any moment, in a month's time. Is there weapon training going on? Are they forming an army or something? There's spies there. So even Jesus taking the time to say, you know what, this is the kind of shepherd I am. You think I'm going to retaliate? You think I'm here for a revolution, to come back and revenge? No, I see deeper needs than that. I see a bigger picture than that. I see a hunger that's far deeper than just bread and fish. I see lostness that's far deeper than you're on the wrong side of the lake today. I see a much deeper issue at hand, and I'm here to take care of all those things. I'm not here to take hate and let that be the energy in which fuels me. I'm going to take hate and my anger that he has, no doubt, towards the death of his cousin and murder in general, and he's actually going to bottle that all up and pour out grace. I don't know about you, but grace is by far one of the last things that come out of me when I feel slighted, hurt, angered. Heck, I don't have anybody in my family that's been murdered. But you can't imagine that I would not be thinking about hosting a dinner party with the news that my cousin's been murdered by authorities. Let me get all the people who actually may be for this king. Let's get them together and let's pour it all out. I'd be seeking refuge, and if I was interrupted, I'd get more angry. Jesus says, bring them here. They're lost. They need a shepherd. And let me take this anger and hurt and actually meet needs. Far different than any of us probably would do, and far different than any of us would expect of someone who has been pained and hurt like that. Surely he's going to do something. At least get an audience with Herod and tell him how much of a schmuck he is. Something. But what he does, none of us would expect. Mark is doing this intentionally to say this is the kind of shepherd that we have. There's a shepherd in Tiberias, which is where Herod was, across the lake. And he likes to get people together, but only the best people. And his parties that are meant to bring life actually end in death. But here I'm creating a banquet. Here's my symposia. Not with the rich, not with the military leaders, not with the who's who, but the forgotten, lost people of Israel. The poor, the common folk. That's my kind of party. And this party that I'm dishing out, it's not going to end in death. This is actually a party that gives life. Jesus is sending a message. His message is very clear. I'm not like that. I'm a good shepherd. That's the shepherd of God's people, and he's, as we've read in Ezekiel and Jeremiah, that's the bad shepherd. And he can't do it, but I can. And the way I do it is not coming back with revenge, but I come back to give life. Are you following me? So Jesus does this. Green grass, all these things. As you read it next time, as you read through the Gospels, these are all, again, for persecuted people in Rome. They're like, oh, yep, Psalm 23, my good shepherd. Yes, he leads me beside still waters. We'll get to that in a moment. But Jesus affirms all these things over and over again for these people. You know, there's so many different points that I'm not going to get in today, but you could say, take whatever you have and bring it to Jesus and he'll make the difference. That's a good point. All right, you could say, okay, I'm lost in shepherd. He's gonna take care of me. Bread, great. You could do that. Bread for them in the first century was sacred. Some of you guys take the crust off your bread and throw it away. I mean, that's sacrilegious, man. That is stinking, terrible stuff. I mean, the crustables would never find their way into the temple. First century Jews believed that bread was sacred. That if they found bread on the ground, they would pick it up and put it on a wall or stone for someone else to come and get. It would not be rubbish. You wouldn't pick it up and throw it away. Bread was life. So it's no surprise that when Jesus talks about his word, what does he call it? Bread. Bread. Sacred. This is the bread of life. People live on every word that comes from the mouth of God. Bread was sacred. So Jesus here is saying, okay, 5 loaves is all we got. Let's break it up. Literally, symbolically, figuratively, let's dole out life to everyone. And not just life, so you can just get enough, but as Psalm 23 says, you're satisfied. Satisfied completely and fully. To the point where there's still bread around, and the disciples go pick up all the broken pieces. We're not wasting any of this. It's sacred, and they've got more than they need. But we're picking up 12 basketfuls of bread and fish. That's who the Good Shepherd is. That's who our Jesus is. So they're all coming around Jesus. What's he going to do? What's he going to do? What's he going to do? Is this revolution? Is this retaliation? Is this weapons training? Is this army building? No, this is grace giving. This is life moments. This is compassion pouring stuff. And disciples would have, without a doubt, noticed that this Jesus, he's checking all the boxes. He's fulfilling everything that we'd hoped he'd be. But there's still plenty of confusion for them. The next story here that finishes Mark chapter 6 is a familiar one too, where Jesus walks on the water. Read that with me. You guys following along here? Coming in for a landing here. It says, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida while he dismissed the crowd. After leading them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Shortly before dawn, he went out to them, walking on the lake. He was about to pass them by. When they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." Then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. When they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret and anchored there. As soon as they got out of the boat, people recognized Jesus. They ran throughout the whole region and carried the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. Wherever he went, into villages, towns, or countryside, they placed the sick in the marketplaces. They begged him to let them touch even the edge of his cloak, and all who touched it were healed. I'll draw your attention up here to verse 45. Another translation, or other gospels, it say the people were forcing, I believe it's in John's account of this same story, people were pressing up against Jesus. This was kind of that revolutionary vibe that was still going on even after their bellies were full. That they were actually, John says, they were trying to take him by force to become king. So they saw this miracle, and it just reinforced, this is our dude. Okay, thanks for the meal, thanks for the shepherding, but now we're full and ready for war. And they want to make him the king. And Jesus says to the disciples, he made them get into the boat. Verse 45. You combine this with John's account. Some people believe that Jesus' disciples were starting to believe the hype. That this throng of these people were like, yeah, let's make him king, let's make him king. And the disciples are buying into it like, yeah. So Jesus says, you know what? Get in the boat. Get out of here. Get out of here now. Not like, oh, we're going to get trampled. That's not why I'm here. Get in the water. Get over this, because this is not how this is going down. I am not here for this. So Jesus takes a stand even in this moment to butt against this type of shepherding that the Israelites and Jews believed our Messiah would be, but he's not that. So he sends them out, and now they're across the lake, and they're straining at the oars. A big wind picks up, and this is now what we see here. This is not the same story where they're across the lake, big squall comes up, and Jesus, help us. Do you think we're going to drown? That had already come. So this is the disciples' second time of being in the water without a paddle, or they do have oars, and it's troublesome. Jesus is not behind them. He's in front of them. These are small details that I encourage you to pick up on them. Verse 48 says he was about to pass by them. So Jesus isn't out there in the water and they're drowning and then he comes for a rescue mission. Jesus is actually walking past them. He's like, hey, you guys are struggling over there. I'm walking past you. He's actually leading them across the water. Those details are important. Why is that? We've talked about the Good Shepherd in Psalm 23. Now Mark's getting even more clear about who Jesus is. This is the Exodus. This is the crossing of the Red Sea stuff. This is the wilderness where God fed the Israelites after they crossed the Red Sea with bread and quail, with meat and fish, with meat, quail, and bread, manna. So Jesus walking on the water here, leading them across the Sea of Galilee in the midst of this storm. You have all these connections to Exodus chapter 14. Exodus 14, there's water. They have trouble getting across the water. There's wind in Exodus 14. There's a dictator in the past that's kind of clamping down on them. Exodus 14, it's Pharaoh. Mark 6, it's Herod. You have all these scenarios. Moses helps them come across the water. He leads them across the water. Who's doing it now? It's Jesus. Jesus is a greater Moses. Moses didn't make bread in the wilderness. God sent it. Here in the wilderness where they're all gathered, who's making the bread now? God. Who? God. Who's God? Jesus. This is the stuff here where it's reinforcing that Jesus truly is the Good Shepherd. And when he finally gets in the boat, he hops on, what does it say about the water? It says it became still. He leads me beside still waters. What does he say to them? Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. Do not be afraid. My staff guides you. The shepherd guides. Do not be afraid. Take courage, it is I. In the Greek translation is the exact same words that God said to Moses in Exodus chapter 4 at the burning bush. I am who I am. What Jesus is saying here, take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. Same words God muttered to Moses in Exodus 4. All this to a crowd back in Rome, hearing these gospels, reinforcing that God indeed is here. He has come. He has shepherded us. He has quenched our fears. He has calmed our fears. He leads us. He guides us. He takes care of us. I have nothing to be afraid of because his rod and his staff comforts me. He makes me lie down on green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. That's who our God is. And in these real stories of going across water and fish and bread, it's God breaking into the present to showcase who he is as a good shepherd. Now today in the 21st century, how is God breaking into our lives to remind us that he is the good shepherd? That he leads you beside still waters, that he takes care of you, that he's got the bread of life. That's more than you could ever ask for. It will actually quench all of your thirsts. It will fill you up well beyond. We have a good shepherd who's still throwing a party. Not a party of revolution and revenge, but a revolution of grace and love that gives life to everyone who decides to sit down in the green grass and eat it. I ask you, God is calling for you to sit down, be still, on the green grass, and let him shepherd you. Some of us in our hearts are raging with anxieties, with fear, with anger, with issues that we believe need to be fixed in our culture and our government, and we think it's up to man and ourselves to do it. And we're unsettled all the time. You go from day to day being grumpy, angry, easily irritated, frustrated, worried, nervous, you name it. It's a constant cycle of uneasiness. And there's enough life, there's enough media, and there's enough reminders that this world isn't what it's meant to be to continue to fuel those flames. But I think some of us as disciples are sitting there far too long, who go to Jesus like this crowd and says, come on, I'm angry. Let's figure this out. Fix this. Did you see what they did to me? Did you see what they're saying to me? See what my boss did to me? See what the government's doing? You see this? And you're enraged. And you're asking for your shepherd to retaliate. But he sees a deeper hunger in you. He sees a deeper issue. This isn't time for retaliation. This isn't time for violence. This isn't time for anger to take control. This isn't time for you to be walking around, stomping, kicking rocks through life. This is the time for you to sit down, be still, and be reminded that you have a good shepherd who's got everything and more. This isn't a call to be passive. This is a call to be active in sitting down. to actively sit down with God this week and let him shepherd you. Let him sit you down in the green grass and help you make sense of all that's raging across the sea. Help you make sense of the issue that you're upset about, that he is too. He takes no joy, as Greg mentioned in the communion, no joy in the wrongness that fills this world. No joy in John the Baptist being killed. No, hey guys, no big deal. Let's figure out the deeper issues. No, this angered Jesus. But the revolution he's bringing, the people he's calling to be revolutionaries, isn't one of weapons training. And how does he get them ready to move forward across the sea to other challenges? How does he get them ready? By reminding them that he's the good shepherd. Sit down in the green grass. What do you have? Bring it to me. I'll multiply it to remind you that I make life. I can take whatever non-essentials you've got and make it essential for the scenario. But you've got to sit in the green grass. You've got to let me do this. What if they hadn't? What if the sarcasm ended right there? What do you want us to do? There's so many people. Get them out of here. Okay, suit yourself. Life would not have been had. So in your doubts, in your sarcasm, in the challenges that we face, the sarcasm that fills my lungs throughout the week of things that are happening to me, the annoying things that I say and have over for the weekend, those things need to be silenced. I need to go ahead and take one step, even if it's doubting, even if it's, let's see what this does, to just do what Jesus says. Okay, I'm doubting, I'm sarcastic, I don't think this is going to work. Let me just do what Jesus says here. Take what I have and distribute it to him and let him do his thing. So what's angering you? What makes you anxious? What makes you fearful? What makes you worried? What makes you kick rocks? What makes you shake your fist at the earth, at the sky? Who in your mind comes up right now? Don't look at me, that you're frustrated with. What thing did your spouse say that you haven't forgiven? What's the thing that just got you all worked up? What's the one thing that you don't look forward to going back to work on Monday? That's not the work, but that person, and you're letting it rule you. We don't have the Romans breathing on our necks, threatening us because of our faith. And to my shame, we let so much less stir us up. But here, even in our embarrassing situations comparatively, Jesus doesn't say, hey, get it together. He says, take a seat. Take a seat, and let me remind you that I bring a different type of symposia to you. A symposia of life. Life to the full. More than you could ever ask or imagine. And those next challenges that the disciples would have faced, crossing the lake, he says to us when that next challenge comes, I am who I am. Take courage. This gives me a lot of peace because these are back-to-back scenarios of the disciples not getting it. And every time, Jesus doesn't say, come on. He says, take courage. There's the reminders. And even after this, guys, isn't this me or you? Me and you? Verse 52. They didn't understand about the loaves. And what does it say? Their hearts were hardened. Guess who in this great exodus of feeding the people in the wilderness and dealing with the storms across the Red Sea, guess whose heart was hardened in that story? Pharaoh. What is Mark saying? This pains me, but it's true. And if you admit it, aren't we more like him than we are like Jesus? Don't we have more in common with Pharaoh, who saw all the miracles, all the plagues, and said, okay, I'll really trust him. And then he hardened his heart again and hardened his heart again. And even after the miracles, he said, you know what? I'm going to take things into my own hands. I'm going to chase after those Israelites. And it ended in what? Death. These are echoes for us in history to be reminded that Jesus, even though we are hard-hearted in all of this, he continues to be the good shepherd. You've had failures this week. You think of this sermon, you're like, oh, I did it again. I am who I am. Take a seat again. Marcus, take a seat again. Esther, go ahead. Green grass. Drew, plenty of green grass over here. Bill, newly married, you already blew it. Just kidding. Here's some green grass. He won't blow it. There's green grass for all of us. There's life, bread, and fish for all of us. And when we fail through the challenges of life, we have a God here who even sees our hard hearts, says, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and break this bread. I'm going to go ahead and dole this out. And that imagery would have not been lost on the disciples who are in Rome. That bread that was broken, by this point, as they read this gospel, they would have thought of the upper room. Not of literal fish brought by a little boy with the help of Andrew, but actually his own body broken for them. Doling out not life-giving bread, but now his body. And that's what we think of. That's what keeps us strong. That's what keeps us going. That's what softens our hearts, is that bread that came and was broken is not physical bread, but our very good shepherd who broke his body for us. So we are in a revolution. But we are in a revolution of taking the things that bother us, sitting down the green grass, being fed, and then, like him, able to pour ourselves out. Offer symposia to the world of grace and real life. Don't get bogged down in what's happening in your life. Sit down with God. Sit down in the grass. Let him feed you so that you, as the disciples did, sent out to also be good shepherds, offering real life that is life. So here's your practice. Whatever's bothering you, take enough time to actually feel it. And then sit down. Find the green grass, fireside in your living room, or up on a mountainside in Salem or Roanoke, or in the quietness of the car before you go into work, or let your spouse deal with the kids. You can go lock yourself in the bathroom for 20 minutes and just think about the green grass and spending time with your good shepherd. And then whatever that is, ask God to be like him. Soften my heart in the midst of great tragedy, annoyance, irritation, hurt, pain, frustration, and let me be like you to gather others and offer life back to them. Because I know you broke for me, and now I actually have life. Help me to imitate you, my good shepherd. Amen? Let's stand for a final song. Thanks so much for coming, guys.